Part 31. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 301. When the official's wife heard this, she lowered the corner of her mouth with a look of contempt on her face and said, "What's the use of a daughter? In the end, she has to give it to someone else's house. It's just water thrown away." When Niu Niu heard this, she turned to look at Zhang Yuniang doubtfully. He seemed to be expressing his doubts to his mother. Zhang Yuniang touched the soft top of her daughter's hair soothingly. She was about to help her daughter refute. "But I didn't expect the child's mouth to be faster." "But aunt, you are your daughter's family. And, do you think you are useless? Do you also think you are a puddle of water?" The little girl's voice was obviously babyish, but it had a sharpness that ordinary people don't have. Mrs. Guan, who was still smiling at first, immediately turned cold when she heard this. "You little girl, no one taught you the rules at home? How do you speak to your elders?" Mrs. Guan couldn't talk to Niu, so she could only use her status as an elder to suppress others. Zhang Yuniang was very angry when she heard this and opened her mouth to refute. But she didn't expect that she would be overtaken by others again. "I don't know that Mrs. Cheng is so contemptuous of herself." The eldest princess's voice reached everyone's ears. Mrs. Cheng could scold Niu unscrupulously, but she did not dare to confront the eldest princess. At this time, she hurriedly defended, "Your Highness, forgive me, I did not mean that, but this child is too sharp-tongued and lacks education." The eldest princess said expressionlessly, "This child was raised by her parents personally, and her father is my son's mentor." "Are you talking about my son's master, the #1 scholar whom your majesty kissed, and say his education is not good?" Mrs. Cheng also didn't expect that the eldest princess would suddenly put down her big hat. People in the capital always have eyes on the top of their heads. Although Gu Mingda is the #1 scholar, he has no foundation and comes from a remote country. Mrs. Cheng can't help but feel contempt for him. The eldest princess said in front of all the officials' wives, "Mrs. Cheng is very well educated. She doesn't feel ashamed at all when she bullies the younger ones. When I meet Mr. Zhang in the future, I will also ask him if he is the same. I think my daughter is useless." Mrs. Cheng naturally did not dare to answer this. The eldest princess was born as a girl. If the eldest princess really asked about her husband, she would not know how to deal with herself later. "Your Highness, Princess, forgive me. I am ignorant and self-contemptuous. I am just making people laugh. Your Highness, please don't take it to heart." Mrs. Cheng accused her again and again. But the eldest princess still didn't let go. Mrs. Cheng had no choice but to turn to Niu and Zhang Yuniang and said, "Mrs. Gu, Miss Gu, I have offended you so much just now, please forgive me." Zhang Yuniang looked at the eldest princess, who nodded slightly. Zhang Yuniang then said, "Mrs. Cheng's words are serious. I know that Mrs. Cheng is eager to have a son, but our daughter's family is usually trapped in the inner house, and we should cherish our own bodies. How can we make such remarks that look down on ourselves?" When Mrs. Cheng heard this, she still disapproved of it, but she did not continue to refute it. She just kept nodding in agreement, hoping to get rid of this issue as soon as possible. After this incident, the people seeking blessings lost much interest, fearing that they would be the next target of the eldest princess to scare the monkeys, so they slowly dispersed. The eldest princess waved, and Niu trotted to her side. The eldest princess, who was dressed in gorgeous clothes and had a head full of pearls, was not very convenient in her movements, but when she saw Niu running towards her like a happy deer, she couldn't hold it back, bent down and picked up Niu. The eldest princess waited. "It seems a little heavier than last time." Niu and the eldest princess have not met many times, but she feels that the eldest princess is very kind, so she is very willing to get close to her. "And Princess, I have a good meal," Niu replied crisply. When the eldest princess heard this, she said, I can tell, my belly is getting bigger again. Nyunia was so frightened that she retracted her belly on the spot. The eldest princess couldn't help laughing when she saw the little girl's cute behavior. She reached out and patted Niu Niu's belly. Zhang Yuniang bowed to the eldest princess and said, Thanks to your highness for rescuing the siege, otherwise we might have offended someone again. The eldest princess said casually, Although you have just entered the capital, you should be more cautious in everything, but as long as you don't cause trouble, there is no need to be afraid of it. The eldest princess's words were full of support, and Zhang Yuniang was naturally grateful after hearing this. The eldest princess turned to Nyuniu again and asked, My dear, you are so capable, do you really accuse so-and-so of being pregnant? Zhang Yuniang was not completely ignorant of the current situation. When she heard this, her heart suddenly rose, fearing that Nyuniu would be caught in the palace for saying something big. Niu Niu shook her head and said, I probably don't have this ability. I only know that the ant in front of me is so beautiful. I like her too. I think she should have a little baby. The little baby will like her as a mother-in-law relative. When the eldest princess heard this, her eyes narrowed, and then she asked with a smile, Will the person Nyuniu likes get pregnant? Niu Niu tilted her head slightly, thought carefully for a long time, and said, I don't know. The eldest princess did not continue to ask, insisting on coming up with a result. Go and play, your sister Ling is still waiting for you. After the eldest princess separated Niu Niu and Shen Ling, she said to Zhang Yuniang, I don't know if Niu Niu is really capable of helping people get pregnant, but there are too many people who heard these words today. Whether it is true or not, they are hiding it can't lie anymore. Zhang Yuniang's face turned pale. The princess continued, You should know something about the situation in the palace. The Queen Mother has been worshipping Buddha and burning incense all year round in order to pray for a son or daughter for the emperor. Instead of waiting for someone with ulterior motives to plot against you in the future, it is better for me to say this. You can relax. I will ask the Queen Mother to protect Nyuniu. Zhang Yuniang didn't know how to answer for a while. The princess didn't keep urging her, but said, After you go back, discuss it carefully with the champion and give an answer as soon as possible. Because of this incident, Zhang Yuniang, who originally thought it was just an ordinary banquet, felt heavy in her heart. Even though the banquet at the Duke of Xian's mansion was extremely luxurious, Zhang Yuniang still couldn't eat. Nyuniu, on the other hand, didn't know the adults' worries at all. Her heart and eyes were full of delicious food. When she was eating heartily, she saw Qin Jingshu from the corner of her eye. An old nanny stood behind Qin Jingshu, the one who had urged her to meet the guests in the flower hall. Although Qin Jingshu was holding chopsticks, she was not allowed to pick up food. She could only let the old nanny spread the food and could not eat more. Coincidentally, at this moment, Qin Jingshu also looked at Nyuniu, and she gave Nyuniu a smile that was uglier than crying. Nyuniu shivered in fear when she saw this situation. She saw with her own eyes what Qin Jingshu complained about last time, and Nyuniu was immediately distressed. Nyuniu felt that eating was the most important thing. She couldn't help but feel lucky that she was not the daughter of the Duke of Xian's mansion. Otherwise, what fun would there be in life if she lived like Qin Jingshu? After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 302. Is this serious? Mrs. Xiangguo frowned and asked Nanny Li beside her. After the banquet was finally over, Mrs. Xiangguo heard about the Fuwa before she could take a break. She frowned and said, On my son's big day, it's fine if the number one scholar comes to steal the spotlight. His daughter is also restless. She gives herself such a name. She is determined to make a name for herself by stepping on my family. Grandma Li has been serving Mrs. Xiangguo for decades, and she still can't understand Mrs. Xiangguo's strange brain circuits, but that doesn't stop her from helping her do evil. She said, "Don't have close friendships with this family, madam, just stay away, that's it. I just don't know why the eldest son likes them so much." "Yeah, why does Jing'er like this family so much? He even came to me and told me that he wanted Jingshu to play more with the little girl named Gu. It's really a joke. My daughter comes from a prominent family. The people who came down and settled down together don't have to lower their status," Mrs. Xiongguo said casually. Before the master and servant finished speaking, someone came in to report. It was known that it was the second wife, Mrs. Li, who was asking to see her. Mrs. Xiongguo frowned slightly. "Why did she come to me? Mrs. Xiongguo will only give Mrs. Li some good looks when she needs her. When she is not needed, Mrs. Xiongguo will show no pretense. Mrs. Li also understands her sister-in-law's temperament, so she won't come looking for her when she doesn't want to plot against her." Over the years, apart from their estranged relationship, the two sisters seemed to be very harmonious. "What brought you here? I thought you were too busy at the old lady's house," Mrs. Xiongguo said with a strange expression. The wife of Duke Xiongguo was old and sick, and Mrs. Li, as the second daughter-in-law, had been waiting at the bedside. Because of this incident, Mrs. Li was quite famous in the capital, and she once surpassed Duke Xiongguo's wife. Mrs. Li didn't care about Duke Xian's wife. She said with a smile on her face, "Sister-in-law, now Jingshu is raised by her mother's side, and I watched Jingshu grow up. I know that sister-in-law has great expectations for Jingshu. I have high hopes, and Jingshu is the only girl in our generation. If I don't tell some things, it will ruin the child's future." Mrs. Xiongguo felt harsh when she heard these words. As a mother, she was deprived of Qin Jingshu's education rights, which was not something that made her happy. But in the end, it was her daughter's future that mattered. Mrs. Xiongguo could only ask with a cold face, "What did you see?" Mrs. Li didn't care about her sister-in-law's pretense and acted like a nice person. "Today I saw that Jingshu was getting along with the girl from Gu Zhuangyuan's family. After all, that child was born in the countryside, so her behavior was inevitably a bit vulgar. I'm afraid Jingshu got too close to her and learned those country ways." When Mrs. Xiongguo heard this, she raised her eyebrows and said, "It's rare that we have thought of the same thing. I don't like that child either. He doesn't look very good looking, but everyone praises them as if they were nothing." Mrs. Xiongguo wanted to scold others for being ignorant, but when she thought that the person who liked Niu Niu the most was the eldest princess, she had to swallow her words. Now Mrs. Li only felt that Niu Niu and Mrs. Xiongguo had similar facial features, and was still unable to determine Niu Niu's true identity. However, she did not expect that Mrs. Xiongguo was already so disgusted with Niu Niu. The purpose of her special trip was to keep Niu Niu away from the Duke's mansion, as well as Mrs. Xian and Qin Jingshu. Only by staying far away can Mrs. Xiongguo not doubt Jingshu's identity. Mrs. Li relaxed and was happy to say compliments. "It turns out that my sister-in-law has already made up her mind. It's me who talks too much." Mrs. Xiongguo still looked down on others and said casually, "It's hard for you to bother so much for Jingshu. It's not worth it for Jingshu to call you aunt." Mrs. Xiongguo's words were unpleasant, but Mrs. Li still had no intention of arguing with her, but stood up and left politely. There were only two masters and servants left in the room again. Nanny Li said with a smile, "Madam, the second lady is very fond of the eldest lady." This slight reminder fell into the ears of Duke Xiongguo, but she couldn't understand it. Instead, she said proudly, "She knows that our Jingshu has great potential, how can she not do her best? It's a pity that she just and is not her biological mother. No matter how kind she is to Jingshu, Jingshu still thinks that I, her biological mother, is her first priority." On the carriage returning from the Gu family, only Niu Niu was smiling and talking about what she had seen and heard in the Duke's mansion. Both Gu Mingde and Zhang Yuniang were worried, but they still managed to cheer up and listen to their daughter. Jingshu said that her eldest brother has a big study room with many books. She said that she didn't have time to show it to me today and would take me to see it next time. Jingshu said that she has a very, very big box for all kinds of palace flowers. She is taller than me. She said that if I look back and like it, she can give it to me. Nayuniu happily shared it with her parents. Gu Mingde touched his daughter's little head and asked gently, "Does Nayuniu like Gonghua very much? I will divert the carriage to the market now." Niu Niu shook her head and said, "Dad, I don't like Gonghua, I just like friends." Gu Mingde pulled a smile from the corner of his mouth and said, "Dad may have made a mistake." "Niu, do you still remember what Dad told you about how to make friends?" Niu nodded vigorously. "As long as there is a return, Dad, don't worry, I will remember it. If my friends are good to me, I will be good to them. Niu knows how to make friends best." Gu Mingde smiled and touched his daughter's little head. Niu tilted her head, looked at Gu Mingde, then looked at Zhang Yuniang, and said, "Dad and Mom both look so strange." Gu Mingde was stunned. The little girl frowned and thought for a moment, then made a strange analogy. "It's like Dad and Mom are in the carriage, but their minds have flown to other places." Gu Mingde and Zhang Yuniang didn't expect that their minds were not in the right place, and their daughter actually saw through it. "My dear, it's Dad and Mom's fault. Dad and Mom should listen to you carefully." The couple apologized to their daughter together. Nayuniu shook her head and asked, "Are Dad and Mom thinking about something difficult? Can I help?" Looking at his daughter's pure and beautiful eyes, Gu Mingde didn't know where to start. "My dear, if someone asked you to leave Dad and Mom and live in her house for a while, would you be willing?" Gu Mingde asked carefully. Nayuniu asked, "Are you going to Uncle Sun's house?" "Not Uncle Sun, but someone I don't know," Gu Mingde said. "Why should I live in a house I don't know? Can't I not go?" Niu was puzzled. Gu Mingde sighed and said, "If that person asks, you can't not go." Niu asked, "How long will it take? Can I come back?" "I don't know how long it will take, maybe a month or half a year, but Daddy promises that he will do his best to take you home." Zhang Yuniang even took out her handkerchief, fearing that her daughter would cry. Unexpectedly, Niu looked relieved. "It's good to be able to come back, I'm just afraid that I will never see you again." You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 303. Zhang Yuniang was immediately filled with grief when she heard this, and she hugged her daughter in her arms. Niu did not cry, but Zhang Yuniang's tears fell. "My daughter, who has finally grown fat, must be sent to that place," Zhang Yuniang cried. Gu Mingde held his wife's hand and comforted her. "It's just a saying now, it may not be true, maybe there is room for maneuver." Although he said so, Gu Mingde felt that there was basically no possibility, and now it all depends on how the palace arranges it. Zhang Yuniang also knew that the matter was done, and nodded helplessly. Niu raised her little face and said, "Don't worry, Dad and Mom, even if you stay in another place for a year or two, you are the best parents in my heart, and Niu will always think of you in my heart." Zhang Yuniang heard this, and the tears that had just stopped wanted to come out again. When the carriage returned to the Gu family, Ms. Gu had been waiting in the main room. She was shocked to see Zhang Yuniang's red eyes. "What happened? Someone bullied Yuniang? Is it someone from the Duke of Xiongguo mansion? They are too much, I'm going to ask them for an explanation." Ms. Gu jumped up anxiously. Although the old lady did not dare to attend the banquet of the Duke of Xiongguo mansion, she was angry now and was about to go out with a broom. Gu Mingde hurriedly stopped her and said helplessly, "Mother, you are really impatient. It has nothing to do with the Duke of Xiongguo mansion." When Mrs. Gu heard this, her shoulders relaxed, but she did not put down the broom in her hand. Instead, she continued to ask, "Who bullied her? I'm going to ask for an explanation." Xie Chuan, who was wearing a mask on the side, did not speak, but his eyes kept looking at Zhang Yuniang with concern, picking up the spear and putting it down several times. After all, the matter the princess said was not settled, and Gu Mingde did not dare to leak the news. At this time, he turned his head and looked at Zhang Yuniang. After years of marriage, they have a tacit understanding. Zhang Yuniang reached out and wiped her tears, saying, "Mom, I saw the Duke of Xian's mansion holding a banquet to celebrate. There was a man who looked very much like my father at the banquet. If he were still alive, he would be so happy to see that my husband is so successful now." Grandma Gu finally put down the broom and said, "It's good that you are not bullied. It turns out that you miss your father. Your father is a good man, but unfortunately, his health is not good." Zhang Yuniang nodded gently. When her father was alive, she could barely eat enough. After her father died, her stepmother wished that she could only eat one bite a day. She looked down at Na Yuniu. Both mother and daughter had been tortured by Cai Pose. Now, looking back, she felt that the past was like a dream. At that time, she had never thought that her husband would be the top scholar in the imperial examination and the whole family would move to the capital. As time went on, Zhang Yuniang forgot to think about these changes in her busy life. Now thinking carefully, it seems that the big changes in the family started with the adoption of Na Yuniu. Zhang Yuniang looked at her lucky star and thought that if her daughter really entered the palace to bring good fortune, if something happened, she would definitely try her best to save her daughter. Xie Chuan was standing aside, watching the Gu family mention Zhang Yuniang's dead father. He didn't know who that person was, and suddenly he felt like he was away from home. Suddenly he felt a warm touch on his hand. He lowered his head and saw the little girl came to his side without knowing when, staring at him with a pair of wet eyes. "Brother Xie, can you teach me how to dance with a spear?" Na Yuniu asked softly. Xie Chuan immediately came to life and said, "I'll take you to the yard." Zhang Yuniang, who was talking to other family members, turned around and saw a big and a small figure walking out hand in hand. She didn't know why, but she suddenly had the urge to cry when she saw this scene. Gu Mingden noticed his wife's subtle mood changes and asked softly, "What's wrong? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" Zhang Yuniang shook her head and said, "I am happy to see that they have such a good relationship." In the courtyard in the afternoon, the warm spring sun shines through the treetops and sprinkles on the brother and sister. Na Yuniu's eyes are bright, and she looks up at Xie Chuan and says, "Brother, can you teach me the gun technique you used to save Dad on the boat that day?" Gu Mingde encountered pirates on the way to Beijing and thought he would die. Xie Chuan descended from the sky and shot out like a dragon, saving Gu Mingde from the pirates' knives. Na Yuniu has heard Gu Mingde talk about this many times, and her eyes are full of expectations at this time. Xie Chuan still had a cold face and said, "Your foundation in that gun technique is too shallow now, and you can't learn it yet." Na Yuniu heard this and lowered her head in disappointment. "Okay, I'll learn something else." Xie Chuan's eyes were slightly fixed, looking at the originally happy little girl, who suddenly became like a rapeseed that had been drained of water. After hesitating for a long time, he said, "After I show you how to do it once, you have to learn something else seriously." Hearing this, Na Yuniu immediately jumped up with joy, clapped her hands and stared at Xie Chuan with burning eyes. Xie Chuan stopped the corner of his mouth that was about to rise. When he was with Na Yuniu, he talked more and completely forgot that he used to dislike gun show the most. He always thought that guns were used to kill enemies in battle, not for people to watch. At this time, for Na Yuniu, he threw all his rules behind his head. AncientChina learned guns since he was a child. Both his father and martial arts masters praised AncientChina as a natural gunner. The young man was muscular, and his movements were full of killing and decisiveness, with the sound of breaking through the air constantly ringing in the ears. Nayunia was stunned without realizing it. Not to mention the little girl, even Gu Mingda who heard the sound was mesmerized. One breath is like a coherent one, the yin and yang sky are turning around, the passing shadow is like a swimming dragon, and the rustling is like a shooting star. Gu Mingda couldn't help but read a poem. He looked at AncientChina's figure opening and closing like a frightening dragon. He felt itchy in his hands and asked his wife for help, setting up the paintbrushes on the stone table nearby. At this time, in the palace, the eldest princess was bowing to the queen mother. Before her daughter could bend down, the queen mother helped her up. The queen mother said casually, "Why did you enter the palace in the afternoon?" "I didn't bring Ling Er and Chang Feng in. I haven't seen the two children in a long time." The eldest princess was not restrained towards her mother. "You can only see them, and you can hardly see me." The queen mother smiled helplessly and said, "You are so old, but you are still jealous of your two children. The AI family only has these two good grandchildren, why shouldn't the AI family be worried about them?" When the eldest princess heard this, she immediately stepped back and said, "Mother, I am anxious to enter the palace this afternoon. What I want to tell you is related to the emperor's brother's heir." After the queen mother listened carefully to the cause and effect, her face was not as happy as the eldest princess expected, but she said, "How could it really be that effective? The Li family also sent several little girls into the palace in the past, saying they could recruit children. However, after raising them for several years, there was still no sound in the harem. I'm afraid they are the kind of people who take care of their children again. Make a raft and hope for good luck." One breath is like a coherent one comes from Zheng Shiwen's Guanqiang technique, Sursing like a shooting star comes from Li Bai's Xiao Xing. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 304. After the commotion in concubine Li's house, the queen mother was not sensitive to such things. The eldest princess thought that the Gu family didn't seem to be happy for their daughter to enter the palace to bring good fortune. After hearing this, she said, "Since the queen mother doesn't believe it, she won't bring good babies into the palace. Then you have to promise me one thing, too. No one is allowed to recruit her into the palace." If the eldest princess continued to persuade her, the queen mother might not take this matter to heart. Now that the eldest princess was blocking her, the queen mother couldn't help but ask a few more questions. "Why do you keep the AI family confused by you? Do you want to help the child enter the palace to improve his identity, or do you not want the child to enter the palace?" Listening to the queen mother's words, the eldest princess explained, "I hope that she will come to the palace to prosper my brother and have a nephew, but I also don't want her to come to the palace. This child grew up in the countryside, so I'm afraid she won't be used to the life in the palace. He follows the rules and is afraid that she will get into trouble in the palace." Earlier, Chang Feng left Beijing and almost couldn't come back. Thanks to this child for saving her, the little girl has a well-behaved personality. I also love her very much. If she is raised by her mother, I have nothing to worry about, but now there is a rumor in the capital. She has a good reputation. If she is brought into the palace by someone else, I'm afraid." The eldest princess did not say everything, but the queen mother understood clearly. She was on the verge of taking precautions, but the person she was guarding against was actually concubine Li. The queen mother worships Buddha and prays for blessings all the year round, and does not care about the affairs of the harem. Concubine Li has been with her for many years and is in charge of the affairs of the sixth palace. She can be said to have a single hand in the harem. Concubine Li has not persecuted the emperor's heirs in these years. After all, None of the concubines in the harem are really happy. However, the queen mother has heard about the persecution of some low-ranking concubines. You are thinking too much. Didn't someone mention the little girl's fortune just today? How could the news spread so fast? The queen mother teased her daughter with a smile. But as soon as he finished speaking, an old nanny came in to report. The queen mother, concubine Li would like to see you. The queen mother was surprised. What is she here for? Is there something important? The old grandma shook her head and said, nothing big seems to have happened in the harem today. Although the queen mother does not care about things, her eyes and ears are still all over the harem, and no matter big or small can be hidden from her. Let her come in, the queen mother ordered casually. Not long after, a beautiful woman who looked to be less than 30 years old, dressed plainly and without much jewelry on her head, slowly walked in. After being greeted, she said apologetically, "Forgive me, the queen mother. I have just received news and am anxious to see you." The queen mother pays homage to Buddha all the year round, and usually wears plain clothes. When the concubines have an audience, she will also put on simpler clothes, for fear of being too showy and causing the queen mother's displeasure. The queen mother glanced at her and said, "If your concubine has something to say, you might as well say it directly." Concubine Li then smiled and said, "My dear, I heard that there is a lucky doll in the capital. As long as she opens her mouth, she can make a woman conceive a child." The eldest princess immediately looked at the queen mother. The queen mother stared at concubine Li with a scrutinizing gaze, and then said casually, "The imperial concubine is well informed." Concubine Li naturally knew that the queen mother was taboo about collusion between the former dynasty and the harem, so she immediately explained, "I'll forgive you, my concubine's mother attended the banquet at the Xiongguo Palace today. She is impatient, so she handed the sign to the entrance after leaving the Xiongguo Palace. Please see me in the palace. My mother is worried about this matter. She knows that my knees are desolate. Whenever there is a little hope, she always wants to give it a try." The queen mother thought about how the women in the harem had been begging for children like crazy over the years, burning incense and worshipping Buddha were common things, and they were trying all kinds of random folk remedies. Even concubine Li, who looked noble and elegant in front of her, poured worm soup into her stomach in order to beg for a child. The queen mother felt pity in her heart and said, "It's a coincidence that you and the eldest princess want to go to the same place." Although concubine Li is now sure that Gu Mingda is the person she knows, compared to suppressing the Gu family, the most important thing is for her to give birth to a child. No matter whether this lucky baby is real or fake, she must not let other people in the palace get it. She must be the first to ask the person to come to her palace in front of the queen mother. The eldest princess said as if unintentionally, "I heard someone say the day before yesterday that the imperial concubine is very fond of Xiao Shiki from Prince Chi's palace. If she really wants to bring a child into the palace to bring good luck, she can definitely raise Xiao Qi under her knees." The queen mother's eyes fell heavily on concubine Li. The emperor has no children, and the concubines in the harem are constantly involved with the king of Qi. The purpose of this move is naturally obvious at this time. The imperial concubine hurriedly said, "I am unlucky. I was not able to give birth to a son and a half daughters for your majesty. Your majesty likes Xiao Qi, so I will inevitably take care of you a little more." The implication was that she was just following the emperor's steps. Although the imperial master asserted that concubine Li knew that the throne would most likely fall to a side branch, and she had contacted several princes in advance, she still hoped in her heart that her child would ascend the throne. "Empress Dowager, please have mercy on me for asking for a child, and allow me to keep the Fuwa by my side," the imperial concubine begged directly. The queen mother looked troubled. If the eldest princess hadn't asked, she would definitely have agreed, even if she didn't think it was useful to raise a Fuwa. But the eldest princess spoke first. "Mother, I have heard someone say that children with great blessings can only maintain their good fortune and help others by staying with people who have deep blessings. The blessings in this palace are profound. No one can compare with the queen. If we really want this child to enter the palace, I'm afraid the queen will be tired. Of course, the eldest princess made up this statement casually, and she said it just to remind the queen mother. The imperial concubine swallowed what she was about to say and said, "Your Highness is thoughtful, but the queen mother has not taken care of the young child for a long time. I am afraid that the child will make noise and disturb the queen mother's meditation." The princess smiled and said, "Your Highness is worrying too much. There is no need for the queen mother to take care of the child herself. It would be enough to assign a few servants. Besides, the child is well behaved and does not make noise." Seeing the two arguing back and forth, the queen mother stepped in to mediate and said, "Although everyone knows why we recruited people into the palace, we have to cover up a little. I will discuss this matter with the emperor. Imperial concubine, please leave first." The imperial concubine was forced to leave. The eldest princess snuggled into the queen mother's arms and said, "Mother, you promised me that you would take good care of the baby." The queen mother had no choice but to ask, "She's just a little girl, why do you like her so much?" The eldest princess said, "You'll know once you see her, she's very lovable. You're not without a daughter. Seeing how you love her, it feels like you're almost surpassing Ling Er," the queen mother joked. The eldest princess said, "Ling Er is grown up and has her own little thoughts. How can she be as lively and cute as a few-year-old baby?" The queen mother shook her head helplessly and said, "Since it's a child, the imperial concubine will definitely treat the child well. Why do you have to stop her?" The eldest princess said seriously, "The imperial concubine is powerful. The Li family has been very unruly in recent years. If the child is really adopted by her, I'm afraid it will be a repeat of the disaster of the foreign relatives." After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 305. What came earlier than the decree to enter the palace was the ceremony of passing on the emperor. Although the rankings of this imperial examination have been announced before, after the Chuanlu ceremony, only those who have passed the imperial examination can find their own way to become officials. On this day, all the new scholars were dressed in dark blue robes, jinchi scarves on their heads, holding what rulers in their hands, and lined up neatly, waiting to bow. Only Yujia and 3 others were different, wearing bright red robes. As the number 1 scholar, the jinchi scarf worn on his head is different, with 2 more silver hairpins. After Gu Mingda changed his clothes, he saw Qinjing, who was also wearing a red robe, and his eyes suddenly lit up. He felt that the person in front of him was shining like a jade flower, as if he had been banished to the world. The second place finisher on the side said with a smile, "Huiyu, you are so handsome. Even if you are walking down the street today, I don't know how many beautiful ladies will be saddened by your sorrow." Qinjing frowned slightly when he heard the compliment. He didn't like others to make fun of him all the time, but today was the grand ceremony for passing on the emperor, so even if he was angry, he couldn't express it. Gu Mingda came to his rescue and said to number 2, "Go out first, don't keep His Majesty and the adults waiting. The great affairs of the country lie in sacrifice and military affairs. The Chuanlu ceremony is actually a grand sacrificial ceremony. After the long prayers, there is a roll call ceremony." Gu Mingda came first in the first-class examination of Ankh Palace in the 19th year of Deacon's 1898 reform. This sound was sung 3 times in succession before officials from the Ministry of Rites came to help and guided Gu Mingda up the imperial road, step by step. Even though he knew he was the top pick 3 days ago, Gu Mingda still had the illusion that he was in a dream. The official from the Ministry of Rites stopped in front, and Gu Mingda also paused. He had already been warned and knew what to do at this time. Gu Mingda lifted up the hem of his clothes and bowed respectfully. Your Majesty Gu Mingda, I bow to the Emperor and thank you for your kindness. After him is Qin Jing, the second best player in the rankings. Only the first 3 people can get the honor. They can go forward along the royal road and kowtow to Tianyan. The chief eunuch at the emperor's side was awarded an official title on the spot. Gu Mingda was awarded the 6th rank of Hanlin Academy as editor, and the 2nd-ranked eunuch, Tan Hua, was awarded the 6th rank of Hanlin Academy as editor. There has always been a tradition in this dynasty that non-Jinchi will not enter the Hanlin, and non-Hanlin will not join the cabinet. The starting point of the officialdom of the top 3 is 1 level higher than that of other Jinchi. After them, people continued to roll call, and there were nearly 100 people in the 2nd class. Each person could do the roll call alone and had a chance to show his face alone. But when it comes to the top 3 scholars and the Jinchi, they don't even have the chance to roll call, and they can only get the sentence 300 people in the top 3, which fully demonstrates the treatment of MRSRU. Although the 2nd-level scholars were not conferred an official position, they could still enter the Hanlin Academy by taking the commoner examination. The 3rd-level scholars did not even have the chance to enter the Hanlin Academy, so they could directly use all their connections to seek an official position in the Ministry of Civil Affairs, or stay in the Imperial Academy. Become a minor official in the capital, or be posted as a county magistrate. After the roll call is over, there is a farewell drink. At this time, every move of these new scholars was still guided by the officials of the Ministry of Rights. Gu Mingda had been warned in advance and was the first to stand up. There are many rules for toasting to the emperor. Only when he saw the emperor pick up the wine glass with his own eyes could Gu Mingda shake his head and toast respectfully. Your Majesty, when the 5 blessings gather, I respectfully apply Tin. I wish you a prosperous spring in the world. Your Majesty, Gu Mingda, sincerely wishes Your Majesty good fortune, good health, and eternal blessings. Li Yong listened to Gu Mingda's toast that contained the word fu that exceeded the standard. He didn't know what he thought of. He laughed loudly and said, the number 1 scholar is so talented in literature, it's obvious to me. The emperor picked up the wine glass and drank it, and then Gu Mingda drank all the wine in his glass. Gu Mingda made a good start. The 2nd-place finisher behind him racked his brains and came up with a toast. However, the emperor's interest was not as good as when he faced Gu Mingda. After just a brief taste, he turned his attention to the food behind him. Tanhua Qinzheng. When number 2 sat down, his eyes darkened. Wait until Qinjing stood up to toast. The emperor smiled and said, the beauty is unique and unique in the world. My Tanhualang is worthy of this sentence. After saying that, the emperor picked up the wine glass and drank it all in one gulp. He obviously liked Qinjing's good looks very much. The emperor drank more or less of a glass of wine, depending on his mood. But his every move touched the hearts of others. Many people present looked at the 1st and 3rd class, and the eyes of many people were focused on the 2nd class who was treated differently. Number 2 frowned and lowered his head, making it difficult for people to see the expression on his face. After the farewell banquet, it is the highlight of the ceremony, praising officials in the imperial street. The new scholars left the palace and rode horses to tour the main streets of the city. This was called the Royal Street to praise officials, which was also commonly known as horse riding and parade among the people. Every year, the imperial street boasting officials is a grand spectacle in the capital, and the restaurants and shops on both sides of the main street are packed with people. The Gu family had already paid a high price for a private room on the 2nd floor of the number 1 scholar in the capital. At this time, Mrs. Gu proudly said to her family, thanks to me. I was in Fang City the day before yesterday. I heard that this private room is very popular every year, so I rushed over to buy it, and I happened to grab this one, the last room on the 2nd floor. Zhang Yuniang smiled and praised, Mom, you are decisive in doing things, otherwise we would have to huddle together on the street like everyone else. The Sun family also stayed in Gu's private room. Sun Jiaxing held longevity in his arms and said, "Auntie, no wonder they say that having an old man in the family is like having a treasure. This is absolutely true." Being praised by Sun Jiaxing, the runner-up in the previous exam, Ms. Gu was so happy that her tail was about to rise to the sky, and she held her head high, like a general who had won a battle. Old man Gu said vaguely on the side, "A blind cat meets a dead mouse." Ms. Gu was in high spirits, and when she heard this, she immediately glared at her husband, "I rely on my real ability." Old man Gu glanced at his wife casually with his cloudy eyes, then moved his feet, slowly walked to the window of the private room, and leaned out to look outside. Although Ms. Gu was angry with the old man, she was still worried and said, "Go back and sit down, what are you looking at blindly, be careful not to fall down." Old man Gu said, I have a plan in my mind." Ms. Gu's brows were immediately frowned so much that they could pinch a fly to death, and she didn't dare to continue bragging to others, and stood aside and held old man Gu tightly. Nyunio suddenly said, "Grandma, is Grandpa recovered?" Grandma Gu looked back at her precious granddaughter and said casually, "How could he be cured?" Dr. Yan said, "That's it. It's okay if he's confused. Just don't run around. Don't run to the mountains with you guys like you did in the countryside. You said he was confused, and you also said some unpleasant words to ruin my show from time to time. When the 5 blessings are collected, I respectfully spread the tin, and the spring stage and the sea wish for a good harvest is from Jiaxia New Year's Day, and Langyan is unique, there is no other in the world is from Bai Shi Lang Chu. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 306. Before Ms. Gu finished her words, she saw old man Gu turned around and stared at her. "What's wrong? Why are you looking at me? Can't I say a few words to you?" Ms. Gu was not polite to her husband. Old man Gu suddenly took out a wooden comb from his arms. "I don't know what wood this wooden comb is made of, but it has a distant fragrance. The style is also very finely polished, and several cloud patterns are carved on it. It is not worse than the one sold in the shop. Old woman, you need to comb your hair more." Old man Gu handed the wooden comb over with a slight tremor. Ms. Gu, who was originally cursing, stopped talking instantly, and the corners of her mouth couldn't help but rise, saying, "You know you have done something wrong, and you come to coax people again." Old man Gu's eyes were still dull, but the words he said were very heartbreaking. "Comb your hair more, so that you can, not lose your temper." Ms. Gu couldn't help but get angry again. Niu threw herself on the old lady and said, "Grandpa is so good to Grandma. He still remembers that Grandma can't get angry. Niu can always resolve Grandma's anger in time." Grandma Gu changed her mind at this time. Although the old man said that she was angry, he still remembered this matter in his heart, so he knew to make a comb for her. Others watched the face-changing drama on the side. Seeing that Grandma Gu was finally not angry at this time, Li said, "Aunt, the old man is confused, but he still cares about you. You are so lucky." Lu Xiru also cooperated and said, "Yes, that wooden comb is really exquisite. The old man must have made it for a long time to polish it so smoothly." Grandma Gu likes to seek evidence of her good life in other people's words. At this time, she was praised by Li and Lu Xiru, and she couldn't stop smiling. Sun Jiaxing said casually, "Aunt, you all say that the old man is confused, but I think there is no one smarter than the old man. He is never confused about important things." Sun Jiaxing's words reminded Ms. Gu. She turned around and stared at her husband with a scrutinizing look. Are you pretending to be confused? Mrs. Gu suspected that Father Gu was afraid that she would settle accounts with him, so he kept pretending to be confused. After all, in recent years, whenever Mrs. Gu was in high spirits, Father Gu would always say one or two big truths to pour cold water on her. The two have been husband and wife for decades and know each other's temperament very well. Mrs. Gu has no bad intentions and is not mean to others, but she can't be too proud. Once you are too proud, it is easy to get cocky, and most of the time, bad things will happen. At this time, Father Gu still looked confused, chanting, "My son is the top scholar, my son, the top scholar." He didn't even look at Mrs. Gu. Old Lady Gu didn't get any results, so even if she was still suspicious, she had to give up. Coincidentally, at this moment, cheers came from the street. "Oh, hurry up, people are coming," Manager Luo reminded. After he opened the two windows of the private room, he gave the good seats to the women and children in the private room. He and Sun Jiaxing stood in the backstage and couldn't see very clearly. "It's Daddy. Daddy is in the front," Nayunio shouted excitedly. The whole family was immediately excited. Old Lady Gu saw a touch of red from afar. Her son, who had been ridiculed by the villagers for many years and thought that he would only be like this for his whole life, now rode a tall horse and walked in front of everyone. Old Lady Gu looked at it and couldn't help but her eyes were red, and her vision gradually blurred. She wanted to see more clearly, so she couldn't help but stretch her neck and lean out, with half of her body leaning out of the window. Mrs. Gu suddenly felt dizzy, as if her head was falling, but the feeling stopped quickly. She turned around and saw that it was Father Gu and Nayunio who were holding her on the left and right. The little girl's face was wrinkled at this time, and she said, "Grandma, don't stretch your neck out, you're about to fall." Father Gu also nodded continuously, "Danger, danger." Mrs. Gu opened her mouth to say something, but her eyes widened instantly, because she watched a young man fall from the window on the second floor across the street. The street was noisy, and the young man's screams didn't even cause much ripples, only the area that was hit by him was surprised. Mrs. Gu turned her head and looked at Father Gu again. Father Gu was still holding her arm tightly, as if he was afraid that she would fall like the young man across the street. Mrs. Gu suddenly figured it out. Whether the old man was confused or sober, he was her old man anyway. "Grandma, Daddy is so handsome." Nayunio's words pulled Mrs. Gu back to her senses. Mrs. Gu looked at her son who was so glorious and nodded vigorously. Gu Mingda, who was riding a horse and walking slowly on the street, looked up as if he had telepathy, and waved to his family members on the second floor with a smile. "Ah! The top scholar is also very handsome, and he seems to be no worse than the third scholar." An excited voice of a woman came from the building across the street. "The top scholar is elegant and handsome, and the third scholar is handsome and romantic. How can people choose?" Not long after she said this, someone told her how to choose. "The third scholar has been engaged, and he has several children. Only the second scholar has lost his wife not long ago. You can try." The unmarried girls looked at the second scholar walking in the middle and sighed in disappointment. It's not that the runner-up is ugly, but his appearance, in contrast to the first and third place, looks particularly ordinary. There are big meals before and after, and only he looks like dry coarse grains. Forget it, I'm still looking for good-looking ones in the second place." A girl said so. Although the second place candidate could not hear these irritating words, he could feel that not many people were looking at him, and these people were not as enthusiastic as those who were in front and behind him. Gu Mingda and Qin Jing were all hit by handkerchiefs, sachets, and flowers, but the second place candidate received very few gifts. The second place candidate could not help but sigh in his heart at this moment. He was really born at the wrong time. If he had passed the high school entrance examination earlier, he would not have to suffer such injustice on his big day. Seeing that the street was coming to an end, someone suddenly jumped out. First place candidate, my daughter is only 16 years old and has a beautiful appearance. I admire your style and am willing to bring 1,000 taels of gold to the mansion. The person who spoke was in his 40s and dressed like a merchant. There were also several servants behind him, carrying several dowries, as if they were eager to marry their daughter to Gu Mingda today. Oh, brother Gu, this is a scammer, using his own daughter to scam, Sun Jiaxing sighed. For scholars, passing the imperial examination is like jumping over the dragon gate. Merchants have always loved to curry favor with officials, so it is not surprising that they would do this. Li said, how can such a family force marriage on the spot when they know that the other person already has a wife? Sun Jiaxing replied casually, they are just trying their luck. If Brother Gu agrees, that would be great. If he doesn't, he will immediately change his mind and say that he doesn't want to be the main wife. While they were talking, Gu Mingda on the long street had already said, friends in poverty should not be forgotten, and a wife who has shared the hardships of life should not be divorced. The merchant really did as Sun Jiaxing expected, and said with a smile, top scholar, what my daughter wants is only the position of a concubine. After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 307. When the onlookers heard this, they were in an uproar. If you take a concubine, you can get a dowry of 1,000 taels of gold. This is 1,000 taels of gold. 1 tael of gold, 10 taels of silver. 1,000 taels of gold, 10,000 taels of silver. The people around him wished they could replace him with their own bodies. You can get both a beautiful concubine and great wealth. Where can you find such good things? Just when everyone thought that Gu Mingda would definitely agree, Gu Mingda slowly shook his head and said, one is like honey and another is like arsenic. My wife and I have already made a white-headed agreement, and we will never accept two colors for the rest of our lives. Although I have never met my daughter, I think that as a woman, if there is no one who is willing to accept herself as a concubine, she will definitely find her own lover in the future. Gu Mingda's words were quite tactful at this time. However, the merchant took matters into his own hands and said with a smile, Master Zhuang Yuan, but the mother in the family is so ferocious. Don't worry, my little girl not only has a dowry of 1,000 taels of gold, she has a virtuous and gentle temperament, and she will definitely be a little bit low-key and take care of the family. Parents who take good care of themselves will not cause trouble to the number one scholar. Gu Mingda was a little impatient at this time. Why did this man seem to be unable to understand people? He frowned and said, not to mention his gentle temper, let alone the price of 1,000 taels of gold, which is 10,000 taels or 100,000 taels gold, there is no need to mention this matter. My wife and I have a deep relationship and have never wanted to take a concubine. After saying that, Gu Mingda was afraid that the man would continue to pester him, so he whipped his whip and the horse took 2 quick steps away from here. Some people are like snakes and scorpions when it comes to taking concubines, while others flock to them like birds of prey. The number 2 pick gave his chief follower in the crowd a look. The chief follower immediately stepped forward, grabbed the merchant who wanted to marry his daughter, and said, Sir, you don't have to hang yourself from a tree. The number 1 pick doesn't want to do that. My second pick I'm willing to help with this. The businessman thought of his daughter who had a bad appearance and was said to be either the top pick or the top pick. Tanhua is not married yet, but everyone in the capital knows that he is Ge Lao's son-in-law. How can a merchant dare to provoke Ge Lao? So after thinking about it, only the number 1 scholar with a weak foundation can give it a try. But then he thought about it. The second-placed wife had recently lost his wife, and it seemed that his daughter would benefit more from being a house filler instead of a concubine. Okay, if number 2 is willing to marry my daughter, I am willing to increase the dowry by another 30%. Listening to the merchant's words, Chang Sui frowned slightly. Others don't know how the second-ranked man lost his wife. How can the long-term follower not know? How could this man of mine be willing to marry a businessman's daughter, who only wanted to have a successful career after high school? Sir, you are joking. Why should a woman who doesn't even want to be a concubine for the number one scholar want to be my master's wife? If word spreads about it, will my master still be an official in the officialdom in the future? Chang Sui said with a cold face. When the merchant heard this, he suddenly thought to himself that it was bad. But the worst was yet to come, so he wouldn't start talking about it. Otherwise, he wouldn't be threatened. Chang Sui knew his master's temperament and said viciously, "Your daughter is willing to be a concubine for the number one scholar, but she refuses to be a concubine for my master? Do you look down on my master? Are you bent on offending my master?" When the merchant heard this, he suddenly looked horrified. Chang Sui continued, "Not only does your daughter have to be my master's concubine, the dowry she carries must also be 3 layers thick. Otherwise, you are deliberately trying to offend my master." Gu Mingda didn't know that the businessman's daughter would eventually become a concubine. When he came back from riding a horse through the streets, his family was already waiting for him. Everyone could clearly hear what he said about rejecting the kiss earlier. Niu Niu clapped her hands and said happily, "Daddy stays calm in times of danger." How amazing! When Gu Mingda heard this, his head suddenly filled with black threads, and he said, "Don't just learn that word and use it randomly. Being calm in the face of danger means being calm in the face of danger." Gu Mingda's characteristic of being a teacher came to light again. When he heard his daughter quoting idioms randomly, he couldn't help but correct her. Niu Niu was accustomed to her father dropping his book bag. Not only did she not feel irritated, but she still listened attentively. "Dad taught my daughter today, and she remembered it. This word cannot be used, so which word should my daughter use?" Niu Niu asked. Without waiting for Gu Mingda to answer, Sun Jiaxing said, "Silly boy, what other word could you use? Of course, you are still in peace, Lu Ziyi is still alive." As he spoke, Sun Jiaxing couldn't help but laugh, bowed to Gu Mingda, and explained, "Last year when I was ranked second in high school, there was also a businessman standing in front of me, and they also wanted the number one scholar, but I am happy to accept it, but I can't compare to brother Gu who is so calm in times of crisis." Sun Jiaxing deliberately quoted the idiom that Niu Niu said wrongly just to tease Gu Mingda. It was rare for Gu Mingda to be teased like this by his friends, and he was not shy on his face. Instead, he turned to look at Zhang Yuniang and said, "There are many people today, and I am not afraid of others laughing. My attitude towards Yuniang has always been the same." When Zhang Yuniang heard this, her cheeks turned red and there were tears in her eyes. Gu Mingda reached out and held his wife's hand. The only thing he is worried about is not his wife's misunderstanding, but the possible difficulties he may have. After all, it was 1,000 taels of gold, but Mrs. Gu was always thinking about it. Gu Mingda added, 20,000 taels of gold is better than not being able to stay together as a family and come together. Gu Mingda thought that he would say a few more words, but he didn't expect that Mrs. Gu didn't realize that these words were being said to her. She even clapped her hands and said, "Second brother, it's good that you understand this. A harmonious family is the root of everything. No matter how many concubines you have, they are not as good as your original wife." Gu Mingda didn't expect his mother to suddenly realize this. Old Lady Gu said, "These days, I've been wandering around the market every day and heard a lot of stories. The most amazing one is that the wives and concubines of the previous dynasty fought against each other, and even caused a prime minister to confiscate his family and exterminate his clan. It can be seen that it is better to have peace in the backyard. Besides, Yuniang has worked hard for so many years to manage the family business, serve her parents-in-law, and raise children. I can't find a better daughter-in-law than her." Gu Mingda didn't lack children. Although old Lady Gu was heartbroken about the loss of 1,000 taels of gold, she also knew that Zhang Yuniang was filial to her. If she had been replaced by another daughter-in-law, she might even look down on her, an old woman from the countryside. No one expected that old Lady Gu was so far-sighted. Li was so envious that she kept thinking, how could such a good mother-in-law not be her own? Nayunia was young and straightforward. She threw herself into old Lady Gu's arms and said, "Grandma knows a lot of things. Grandma is really the pillar of our family. I want to learn more from her in the future. But, Grandma didn't tell me many stories. When will you tell Nayunia the story of the fight between wives and concubines?" After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 308. The focus of children is also very strange. Nayunia is very concerned about the stories she has not heard. Mrsku said helplessly, "Do you also want to hear the story about the quarrel between wives and concubines? You are a little kid, you have to listen to such stories when you are only a few years old." But Niu Niu raised her head and asked in confusion, "Can't the little baby just listen? The fight between wives and concubines is also a story?" On the other hand, Gu Mingda, who was on the side, thought more deeply and said, "Mom, just say the part that you can't say, and the part that can be said." Mrsku thought for a while, this could be a warning to everyone, and she glanced at shopkeeper Luo and Sun Jiaxing. She was naturally very relieved about her son, but for these two people, she was always afraid that they would be dazzled by the colorful world outside and end up suffering Lu Xiru and Li. It is said that in the previous dynasty, there was a prime minister named Lu. He originally had a wife who was poor, but in order to seek benefits, his subordinates gave him concubines one after another. Gu Mingda's talent for telling stories seems to come from Mrsku. There is a rumor that Mrsku tells it with ups and downs, as if she has seen it with her own eyes. After listening to the story, Mrsku made another conclusion: it can be seen that the root of the chaos in the family is that men are greedy for beauty and value sex over justice. If he always respected his wife, how could he end up like this? Gu Mingda's focus seemed to be different from that of ordinary people. He picked up his daughter and said, "The prime minister is the pillar of the country. The quarrels among his wives and concubines have turned the back house upside down. If ordinary people got involved, it would be like a story. The little maid here obviously didn't do anything wrong, but she was implicated just because she was close. My dear, you have to remember that a gentleman does not stand behind a dangerous wall. If you encounter trouble or danger and you cannot solve it, then stay away." When Nayunia heard this, she nodded obediently. "Don't worry, Daddy, I remember it all." Daddy has said these words many times, and Nayunia will memorize them. Gu Mingda patted his daughter's little head happily. However, Sun Jiaxing heard something unusual from the sidelines. After everyone else left, Sun Jiaxing stayed again. He took Gu Mingda and asked privately, "Brother Gu, have you encountered any difficulties?" Gu Mingda sighed. Others couldn't believe it. Sun Jiaxing was both a good friend and Niu Niu's godfather. He should have been informed about this matter. When Sun Jiaxing knew the cause and effect, he frowned. "The Holy Lord is kind, even if he cannot recruit an heir, it will probably not happen. It's just that the queen mother or concubine Li in the palace will anger Qiabao because of this." This is where Gu Mingda was worried. Sun Jiaxing continued, "The Li family has not been very impressive in recent years, doing things unscrupulously. Guanglin Mansion is now privately called Li Jiachen. The Li family is domineering and the things in the fish and meat village have long been spread privately, but there have always been people in the capital. It is rumored that concubine Li may be crowned queen, but no one dares to take the lead in impeaching the Li family." Gu Mingda sighed and said, "I am also from Guanglin Mansion. How can I not know how powerful the Li family is? I just hope that when the decree comes and Nayunia has to enter the palace, She will not offend concubine Li. Coincidentally, before the two of them finished speaking, Chi Das Han walked in holding the post. Sir, this is a message sent from Uncle Li Guo's house, asking him to come to the house for a banquet tomorrow night. The housekeeper sent by the Li family said that the two families are from the same hometown and should take care of each other, Chi Das Han said respectfully. Gu Mingda and Sun Jiaxing couldn't help but look at each other after hearing this. I understand. Gu Mingda waved his hand and asked Chi Das Han to retreat. Brother Gu, you can't go to the Li family's banquet, Sun Jiaxing said. Gu Mingda nodded, I will find a reason to decline. Sun Jiaxing breathed a sigh of relief and said, the Li family is like a dogskin plaster. As long as you attend a banquet at their home, you will be marked by the Li family. They will try their best to set up traps at the banquet so that people can take advantage of them. Gu Mingda also didn't expect that since the Li family was so unscrupulous in doing things, he would be even more worried about Niu Niu. Naturally, what goes up and what goes down works. Isn't it because the Li family dared to do this because they were relying on the favored concubine in the palace? I don't know if it was the palace's instruction to act like this. I'd rather the Li family think you don't know how to commend yourself, than get involved with them. Although they may retaliate afterwards, they won't go too far, Sun Jiaxing said. Gu Mingdan knew what was going on. The next day, a eunuch from the palace came to deliver the order. Although Niu Niu was asked to enter the palace, the royal family wanted to save face. Even the dignitaries in the capital knew what they wanted Niu Niu to do, but they still wanted to serve the Queen Mother. And Niu Niu was not the only one who entered the palace this time, there were also 5 other little girls. After receiving the order, Mrsku and Lu Xiru were both too frightened to speak. Sister, brother-in-law, how did the palace know about Qiabao? Why did Qiabao have to enter the palace? Is there any reason for this? Lu Xiru has been busy with the marinade workshop during this period, so she doesn't know why. Suddenly such a big thing happened. In the eyes of ordinary people, this is a glorious and happy event, but Mrsku, a country woman, is full of anxiety. Oh, why are you going to the palace? It has been sung in the play. If someone accidentally offends the emperor, he will be beheaded. What should I do if I have a headache? Hearing this, Gu Mingda's head was full of black lines. Mother, now that I have entered the Hanlin Academy and can often visit the emperor, why are you not worried that I will be beheaded? Bah, bah, bah. Mrsku glared at her son and said, how can anyone curse themselves like this? Besides, how can this be the same? You are an official, not serving people in the palace. You should think of a way quickly. Can you please keep the good boy from entering the palace? Gu Mingda shook his head and said, now that the palace's decree has been issued, it cannot be changed easily. Mrsku's head was moving very quickly. Can you let me pretend to be sick? The Queen Mother should also be afraid of getting sick. Gu Mingda categorically refused and said, pretending to be sick is the crime of deceiving the emperor. Mother, don't worry too much. With the protection of the Queen Mother, Niu Niu will be fine. Gu Mingda himself was worried, but at this moment, he still had to focus on comforting his mother. How could Mrsku not be anxious when she heard this? Tears fell down and she said, no wonder the old saying goes, extreme joy brings sorrow. Yesterday I was happy, today I am miserable. Gu Mingda hurriedly stopped her. Mom, we can't say such things anymore. We have to regard this matter as an honor. If someone chews the tongue into the palace, the whole family will be implicated. After hearing this, Mrsku cried even harder. But Niu tilted her head, looked at her parents doubtfully, and said, it turns out that my parents said that day that they might send me away for a while. They wanted to send me to the palace. Zhang Yuniang reluctantly took her daughter into her arms, and her tears fell on Niu like broken beads. Niu still didn't know how to feel sad. The little girl raised her face and put it close to her mother's face. The fragrance was soft and pressed against her mother's face. "Mom, please stop crying. Entering the palace is not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe I can still help you in the palace. You also said that I can go home in the future. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shenshen. Chapter 309. Although she had to leave her parents, what Niu Niu was thinking was that this was not because her parents had abandoned her, but because the whole family had no choice. After the little girl thought about this clearly, she acted very considerately. But the more well-behaved and considerate she was, the more distressed Gu Mingda and Zhang Yuniang felt. At this time, Niu Niu racked her brains to comfort the uncomfortable family members, and said, "I haven't been to the palace yet, and I don't know if it is like they said, even the ground is paved with gold." Gu Mingda was the first to calm down. Compared with the discomfort of his daughter entering the palace, the most important thing now is to teach her how to protect herself. Don't rush into places where you can't go. Say less and do less. The palace is not like your own home. There are strict rules. If you do something wrong, just tell the Queen Mother honestly. Gu Mingda was talking, but his words were not as sharp as before. He almost hit his head here and there with a hammer, telling his daughter whatever came to his mind, for fear of missing something. In this way, the other Gu family members gradually recovered, but this night seemed destined to be a sleepless night. After Lu Xiru was so anxious that she walked around the room, she said, "Money. You must bring enough money. They say that money can make the world go round, and it is said that people in the palace are also blind to money." Zhang Yuniang thought of something and asked, "Shopkeeper Luo's cousin, how is she doing in the palace now?" Lu Xiru shook her head and said, "The Luo family only knows that she was named a beauty, but she was not very favored. The imperial concubine and her family are still the only ones in the palace." Zhang Yuniang had also met shopkeeper Luo's cousin before, and she was surprised when she heard this. "Luo Mei is so beautiful, but she is not favored. Luo Myron entered the palace not long ago, she is very good looking and very young. Logically speaking, the emperor is at his most fresh, so why does his words now seem to indicate that he has fallen out of favor?" Lu Xiru sighed after hearing this and said, "The palace is strictly forbidden, and the news inside is not very easy to spread. I only vaguely heard that it seemed that concubine Li violated her taboo, so the emperor gradually ignored her." Zhang Yuniang burst into tears when she heard this. If such a breathtakingly beautiful woman were not in the palace, she would be held in the palm of her hand and cherished by any man she married. It is a pity that she went to that place where no one can see her. Zhang Yuniang originally thought of taking the path of shopkeeper Luo and asking Luo Myron to take care of Niu. Seeing that Luo Myron seemed to be in trouble, she had no choice but to give up this idea. Lu Xiru called Qi Dashan and his wife to accompany her out. "Where are you going so late?" Zhang Yuniang was puzzled. Lu Xiru replied, "I don't have enough money on me, I'll ask someone to borrow it." Who else could she find? It was naturally her fiancé. Zhang Yuniang didn't like to owe people money, but after hearing this, she didn't stop her. She just wanted to use the dividends from the marinade workshop to pay back in the future, and just pay more interest. Compared with the older people who were as anxious as ants on a hot pot, Niu Niu was still thinking about playing. "I have to leave home tomorrow. I originally agreed with brother Chang Feng to go to the Beast Garden tomorrow. It's a pity." She didn't even need to send someone to the Duke Xian's mansion to greet Qin Jingshu, because her good friend was also on the palace list. The little girls on the palace list are all between 6 and 10 years old. They are younger than 6 years old, because they are not sensible and it is more troublesome to take care of them. As for those older than 10 years old, it is easy for the outside world to misunderstand and think that they are entering the palace as concubines. The child will enter the palace the next day, and the entire Gu family is busy. According to the eunuch who announced the previous decree, once the child enters the palace, he will not come out until at least the end of the month. However, the royal family seems to be aware of the mistake and has repeatedly promised that it will not delay the children's learning. The palace has hired a master to teach the children piano, chess, calligraphy, and painting. According to the eunuch who passed the order, they will be trained according to the standards of a princess. The lights were on in the Gu family's house for most of the night, and they had been packing Niu's luggage. Even after spending so much effort, the couple still felt that the preparations were not complete enough, and they always felt as if they had missed something. Niu was young and was coaxed to sleep early. At this time, with the dim light, the couple sat by the bed and looked at the little girl sleeping soundly on the bed. When this child was brought home the year before last, he was as thin as a kitten. He finally managed to gain some flesh on his face, but he has to leave us again. Zhang Yuniang said softly. Gu Mingde patted his wife's shoulder comfortingly and said, Niu has a special constitution. Maybe after staying in the palace for less than a month, the queen will be pregnant, and she will be sent out at that time. Zhang Yuniang sighed, Your Majesty has not had a son or a daughter for so many years. Who can say for sure about this kind of thing? It's not that easy. Gu Mingde saw his wife sad, and felt uncomfortable himself. Although Niu is an adopted child, I don't know why, but I always feel as if she should be my daughter. Gu Mingde tried to divert his wife's attention. But Zhang Yuniang said, This child is lovable. Not only do you think so, but her godfather and godmother also think so. Even Zaira treats Niu as her own daughter. Gu Mingde patted his wife on the shoulder and said, She is a lovable person. Maybe the queen in the palace will be like others and really love this child. Zhang Yuniang smiled bitterly and said, I hope so. Zhang Yuniang stretched out her hand and gently covered her daughter with the quilt. She carefully looked at her daughter's sleeping face for a long time. Then, under her husband's persuasion, she lay down next to her daughter and tossed around for a long time before falling asleep. Little did Niu know that her parents were so worried that they couldn't sleep well all night, but the little girl still had a good night's sleep. Mom, I can dress myself, I don't need your help. Niu softly stopped her mother from helping her dress. Zhang Yuniang's eyes turned red, and then she said, You are going to enter the palace soon, and mother wants to accompany you more. After she said this, Niu naturally had no reason to refuse, but after putting on her clothes, the little girl pressed her face tightly against her mother again. Mom, you will always be my best mother. Zhang Yuniang's nose was sour when she heard this, and she turned her head away, not letting her daughter see the tears that burst out of her eyes. Zhang Yuniang not only helped her daughter dress, but also helped her daughter wash, and she looked like she would never see her daughter again after entering the palace this time. Niu always cooperated with her mother obediently. The little girl used her silent actions to comfort her mother, who still couldn't accept the fact after a night of psychological construction. There was another person who couldn't accept this matter either. The crazy girl was waiting in the yard early in the morning. Her eyes were red at this time, and a big package was placed beside her. Sister Shuiying, didn't you sleep all night? Your eyes look so red, and your complexion looks bad, Niu said with concern. The crazy girl and Zhang Yuniang had the same crying expression on their faces. She cried and said, Why do you want to go to that damn place again? What's so good about that place? That stinky man didn't protect you all the time. You are a clean person, why do you have to go to the palace and get contaminated by dust? After Xiao Fubao's life was stolen, she became the favorite of the Beijing group. Author, Muyun Shen. Chapter 310. Niu looked puzzled when she heard this. Zhang Yuniang felt it was inappropriate and was afraid that her daughter would take what the crazy girl said to heart and accidentally expose it in front of the nobles after entering the palace. She pulled the crazy girl aside to prevent the girl from saying more words that were not suitable for Niu Niu to hear. I know that you have a lot of grievances in your heart, but we have the same intention for Niu Niu's good. There is no way to change the matter of entering the palace. It is better to say these few words, Zhang Yuniang persuaded her earnestly. The crazy girl was just crazy, not stupid. She knew not to miss a word in front of outsiders. Although she felt uncomfortable at this time, her concern for Niu Niu prevailed and her expression calmed down. I have something to say. Zhang Yuniang didn't dare to let the crazy girl talk to Niu Niu again. The crazy girl said directly, it's a palace matter, the taboos of the ladies in each palace, the queen mother's preferences, and the emperor's preferences. When Zhang Yuniang heard this, she looked dubious. The crazy girl said categorically, if you are really good for the third lady, you shouldn't stop me. No one in this world hopes that she will have a good life more than me. Zhang Yuniang hesitated for a moment, but finally agreed to let the two continue to interact. The Queen Mother's taboo is the dead King Pingnan. Remember, don't mention King Pingnan in front of her, don't mention the albizia flower, let alone break into the small Buddhist hall of Shaokong Palace. These are her a taboo for the elderly. There are not many good people in the palace. Please ignore them. You must especially beware of the concubine named Li. Remember this. Zhang Yuniang was very confused and said, there seems to be no high-ranking concubine named Li in the palace. After learning that her daughter was going to be a lucky baby in the palace, she also asked people about the situation in the palace. In terms of favor in the palace, the concubine is the only one in the class. Let alone being a concubine alongside her, the concubine seats are all empty, and most of them are low-level concubines. Who else could have the surname Li? Of course it's concubine Li. She always wants to compete with the empress, but she has evil intentions, and the whole family ends up without a heir, the crazy girl said seriously. When Zhang Yuniang heard this, a drop of cold sweat fell from her forehead. The king of Pingxi that the crazy girl mentioned previously existed. He was the uncle of the current emperor. When the emperor first succeeded to the throne, this uncle served as an auxiliary minister, but his end was miserable. Zhang Yuniang thought about it again and again, but she really didn't know who this concubine Li was. The crazy girl continued, concubine Li was greedy for vanity and liked to exercise power. She relied on her status as the emperor's concubine to force her sister to marry into a wealthy family, and then gave her unlearned brother an official position. It's really annoying, shameless. Which family did her sister marry into? Zhang Yuniang felt that she was probably crazy, and she actually wanted to confirm that what the crazy girl said was not nonsense. Who else could it be? It's naturally the bunch of fools like Duke Xiongguo, the crazy girl replied casually. Zhang Yuniang was stunned when she heard this. She thought about it. The Duke Xian's mansion now only has 2 rooms, and there is no wife named Li. Etc. Zhang Yuniang suddenly realized something and asked, concubine Li? Her brother's name is Li Rude. When the crazy girl heard this, a fierce look flashed in her eyes, that's the man. That's him. Taking advantage of his sister's favor, he acted unscrupulously and killed the 9th master. Zhang Yuniang was shocked. She has been called MRS 9th by the crazy girl, and her husband is the master 9th in the mouth of the crazy girl. Li Rude is a sinister villain. His sister poisoned the empress in the harem, and he attacked master 9th in the court. The two of them caused misery to the empress and her family, the crazy girl said angrily. Zhang Yuniang wanted to pretend that she had not heard these words, but her concern for her husband and daughter prevailed. So, it's not concubine Li, but concubine Li. That character is pronounced severe, right? Zhang Yuniang asked. The crazy girl nodded and said, it is indeed Li, but your accent is not quite right. Zhang Yuniang felt bitter. The crazy girl's own accent was unusually strong, and she in turn accused others of having wrong accents. The crazy girl added, "I don't have time to correct your accent. I'm in a hurry to talk to you." The crazy girl turned to Niu Niu and continued to give a lot of instructions. Niu Niu always looked ignorant, and the little girl didn't even understand many words. She just knew that the crazy girl was doing it for her own good, so she still listened honestly. When the carriage from the palace came to pick them up, the crazy girl was still dragging Niu Niu to talk. She was not in the palace, but she knew the palace very well. It seemed that she had not made any mistakes for 3 days and 3 nights. Under the reluctant gaze of the Gu family, Niu Niu was carried by Gu Mingde himself and put on the carriage. "Be good, don't be reluctant to give up money, spend what you should spend," Gu Mingde warned. Niu Niu nodded vigorously. Gu Mingde gave the old grandma who came to pick her up a thick red envelope again. "My daughter is young and naughty by nature. Please take care of her." The old woman took the money and smiled as brightly as a chrysanthemum, but she still gave Gu Mingde reassurance, "Don't worry, the number 1 scholar, your girl will be raised by the Queen Mother herself when she enters the palace. This is not the case for others. It's an honor that no one can ask for." Niu Niu had a lot of luggage, and the Gu family felt that she needed this and needed that, so the carriage was filled to the brim with her luggage. Carriages entering the palace are subject to inspection as usual. She is just a 6-year-old girl. Although she has a father who is the number 1 scholar, almost everyone knows that this number 1 scholar has a mediocre background. Although the servants in the palace had the old rule of plucking the feathers of the passing geese, they mostly targeted the fat sheep, and did not pay much attention when checking Niu Niu, and even missed 2 wooden boxes and forgot to check. And the 2 locked boxes that looked ordinary in the package were full of gold and silver. After all, no one would have thought that Niu Niu, who was dressed very simply, would carry so much gold and silver with her. Niu Niu was taken all the way to Shaokong Palace, and there were already 5 girls waiting outside the door. She saw Qin Jingshu in the crowd at a glance. "Niu Niu, why are you so late?" "Fortunately, the Queen Mother has not summoned you yet," Qin Jingshu whispered. Niu Niu blushed slightly when she heard this, and said, "My family didn't want to leave me, and gave me a few more instructions." Qin Jingshu couldn't help but feel envious when she heard this. Having also received the news that she was going to enter the palace, her mother wanted to stuff her into the palace right on the spot. Before she left, she only told her a few words to make the ladies in the palace happy. Niu Niu asked again, "Do we have to wait here forever? If the nobles don't summon us, will we just stand there?" Qin Jingshu nodded with a bitter face and said, "The one who has waited the longest here has been waiting for half an hour." Niu Niu felt a little distressed and asked, "Are your legs sore?" Qin Jingshu nodded gently, "A little." Niu Niu sighed and asked, "How long will it take?" Before Qin Jingshu spoke, a girl who looked about 10 years old, dressed in simple clothes but full of arrogance, spoke, "The noble summons, this matter cannot be rushed, sometimes waiting for 2 or 3 hours is common. The last time I waited for a summons, I waited for 2.5 hours, you are a country girl, be careful in what you say and do, don't speak carelessly after entering, so as not to implicate us."